The Innkeeper by Life Sketcher. Chapter 1051 Power and Responsibility. Now, strictly speaking, Lex did not have anything against smoking up. After all, one really cannot live in New York without having at least half your friends and acquaintances partake in some kind of recreational substance, whether that be alcohol or something else. But the man had literally ordered a massacre, which had caused chaos across the entire city, and was actively resulting in severe harm to the city and its people, while he sat here and smoked up. Discover new stories at novelhall.com. That was just wrong. But then again, what did he expect? It had been a while, but Lex put on his notorious anonymity mask, the one which contained a bit of divinity and grew as it absorbed more of it. In the illusion above the city, everyone could see that the person had put on a mask, though they couldn't see him to begin with since they were seeing the scene through his eyes. "Are you the lord of this city?" Lex asked. Even though he did not try to change it, his voice through the mask came out much deeper and more sinister than it actually was. The city lord, who actually looked quite young, was startled by the voice, but when he looked up at the man in the sinister mask, he was not actually scared. Instead, he revealed a strange, twisted smile. "Oh man, I can't believe it's already kicking in. I haven't even warmed up yet. I shouldn't have sent Sheila away, she would have enjoyed this." The illusion up above the city was not limited to just vision, but it was an auditory illusion as well. That meant their voices were reverberating through the city, bringing a stop to the chaos for a brief moment. Sheila, who was the city lord's personal bodyguard, city guard head and mistress, suddenly felt great alarm, and started to make her way back towards the bunker. But even if she reached it, it would not have mattered, for Lex kept it shut with his spirit sense. "Do you know the harm you're causing to the city?" Lex asked as he stepped closer to the man. Honestly, he looked like a teenager. His skin looked smooth and unblemished, as if he had never seen a moment of difficulty his whole life. Well, his cultivation was also not completely pathetic at the initial foundation realm, which must help as well. The city lord suddenly grimaced at the question. "The city? This damned city. I did everything for them, and all they want is more. Bunch of ungrateful rats. I would sell them all as slaves if my stupid projection didn't get stuck." The devilish mask and his deeply disturbing voice were a lot more haunting to the city lord now. It was a good thing he no longer had a body, or else he would have suffered a heart attack from fear. Outside the city, the chaos from the city guards momentarily subsided as no one was sure about the city lord's situation. If he was dead, there was no reason to be loyal to him and fight on his behalf. All the powerful forces in the city gathered at his mansion, since there was no force willing to still fight for him, and soon they reached his bunker. When they opened it, they found it completely empty. The city lord had completely disappeared. No one had an answer for what happened, and a new kind of chaos spread in the city while the forces joined together to calm things down, and then decide on new leadership. There was no clear answer. Everyone wanted to be the city lord. Then, a few hours later, a statue suddenly appeared in the city square. It was titled "The Reward of Being a Selfish Leader." The statue looked just like the former city lord. When some people came close to the bronze statue, they realized they could hear voices. Fear and panic spread through the square as they all retreated. Eventually, someone brave enough stepped forward to investigate, and listen to the wailing noises. It turns out a monster had appeared suddenly and imprisoned the city lord's soul in the statue, so he could hear firsthand from his citizens what a good city lord he was. As the news spread, the fight for new leadership suddenly stopped. Now, everyone was afraid to take power without the ability to handle the responsibility. But by then, Lex had already left. Chapter 1052 Everyone Has to Behave. When Lex returned, the fairies were still unconscious. How long did it take to recover from a cross-generation enchantment that kept them and their entire race cursed? Since he didn't have an answer to that question, Lex was about to throw drops of his blood on all of them, when he suddenly paused. Perhaps throwing his blood around everywhere so casually wasn't the best idea, since he was trying to hide his physique. But he had to admit that its healing qualities were extremely handy. since that was the case, he just had to learn another healing technique. Hey Pell, do you know any healing techniques? This healing is not so straightforward. I do indeed know many healing techniques, but they're not so generic. Within a certain range, a technique may heal certain wounds or illnesses, but mostly it depends on what you are treating. For example, the fairies in front of you. If I pass a technique that simply focuses on vitality, and you use it, through sheer brute force it may allow them to wake up, and possibly even heal what ails them, but that will not be a proper means of treatment. For that, you would have to properly diagnose what is wrong with them, narrow down how to treat them, and then use the most appropriate method. Even though in my previous life, healing was not something I paid much attention to, I learned hundreds of techniques just to diagnose my dragonoid underlings and descendants. Well, we're not doing anything else. Why don't you teach me how to properly diagnose them and then how I can train them? Lex was thoroughly aware that one of his greatest advantages was his quick learning speed. It was abnormal even among cultivators, which is why if he did not make use of it then he would be wasting his resources. After a few minutes, however, all of them sat up straight, now stunned by disbelief. They had actually done it. The thing that they had been looking forward to for generations. None of them thought that it would happen in their lifetimes, but it happened in the span of a single day. Lex coughed. He was well aware that the fairies were understandably stunned, but he did not want to wait for them all over again. Congratulations, you have all gained your freedom. You are now free from the trappings of the enchantment that kept you here, and can go anywhere. It occurs to me that you may not want to stay here, but don't necessarily have anywhere else to go. I understand that it will take you some time to process everything, and come to terms with your new reality, but I thought I'd offer my assistance once more. I come from the Midnight Inn. Surely you've heard of it. If you go. I understand that it will take you some time to process everything, and come to terms with your new reality, but I wish you can accompany me to the inn, as I am about to return. You can stay there for a while, and if you wish and find it suitable, you can even join it. Now I don't mean to rush you, but do you think you could decide what you want to do without sending me on another quest? I have other things to do as well. For a moment the fairies were stunned, until a particularly old-looking fairy stepped forward. Oh great savior, even though we are free now, our enemies from the shaded lands will not relent. They will continue to hunt us down if they find us. We cannot implicate you like that. Lex began to chuckle. Don't worry, the Midnight Inn is a place where everyone has to behave, no matter where they are from. Even the Tree of Heaven cannot misbehave there, let alone others. You don't need to think about anything else. Chapter 1053 All Affinities. The fairies looked at each other, as if they were stuck in a great quandary. They had not seen the ferocity of the hunters which drove their ancestors into hiding, but they had seen what Lex was capable of doing with their own eyes. They didn't want to burden him, yet at the same time he was right in stating that they did not plan on staying in the sealed domain, but had nowhere to go. Lex, who had some experience with fairies now, got the feeling that this was going to drag on, so he decided to persuade them a little more. Look, I am the one who gave you freedom. That makes me responsible for you. I can't, in good conscience, just leave you here to suffer. At the same time, I have a lot of work I need to do. So I would feel a lot better if you came with me to the inn. That way you'd be safe as well, at least until you recover enough to venture out on your own if you so wish. After a bit more prodding, the fairies finally relented. Lex was pleased, but when he asked if there were any other fairy settlements they should visit to check up on, they revealed that there were none. These few fairies were literally the last of their kind. It was at this time that some of the fairies also proceeded to head into the final chamber, but were unable to find the remaining fairy. Lex told them that he had passed away without elaborating. Understandably, the news saddened the fairies, but they did not dwell on it for too long, since Lex was waiting for them. They started packing up, preparing to leave. Lex paid close attention to them, observing the way they used their wings, their body language as they flew, how they utilized their fairy dust, and even how they used their spirit energy. He implemented the changes in real time to his fairy body, and could immediately feel the difference. Lex's slight smile froze. They had all affinities? They could create whatever they wanted? Fairy Lex parked his ship on top of another tree that had been uprooted. This was too ridiculous. This was too overpowered. This couldn't be possible. Yet his gut was telling him that Leroy wasn't lying. At least, he genuinely believed whatever he was telling Lex. The problem was, if such a thing were true, Lex's imagination could not stretch far enough to even begin to consider how powerful just this ability alone was. Perhaps the reason fairies were cursed so long ago was because they were just too powerful, or at least had the potential to become too powerful. Fair Lex closed his eyes and imagined something absurd. Since he was testing the limits of fairy dust, there was no point in doing something simple. He imagined fairy dust that would allow a material to grow, by absorbing other, similar things, then began to flap his wings. Maybe this was an unusual request, but he needed to test it out. After all, if fairy dust could do something that he just learned was extremely complicated, such as healing, there was no reason it couldn't do other complicated things. When he opened his eyes, he saw the fairy dust falling on his ship. He covered all of it with his spirit sense, and began scrutinizing it. For a long time, nothing happened, but he kept on going. Nearly an hour later, Lex noticed something happening, though it wasn't his ship that was changing. Since all his focus was on the ship, he hadn't even noticed that the tree it was sitting on began to shrink a while ago. Only now, that a significant difference had been made, did he finally notice. Chapter 1054. It will probably be fine. The tree trunk had shrunk by about half a foot. There were no creatures eating the wood, nor was there any fire nearby burning it, nor was there anything else in the vicinity that could reduce its size. That only left the ship. The ship was absorbing the wood from the tree to strengthen its hull. Though the speed of absorption was slow, Lex had no benchmark to compare it with. For all he knew, this speed might as well be earth-shattering. But more than anything else, the versatility of fairies impressed him. He had thought earlier on that their ability to manipulate laws was already mind-blowing. But what if that ability was just a side effect of their overpowered affinity for everything? But Lex had seen countless fairies, he was sure. Even if they were being targeted because of their curse, how was it possible that he had never encountered a single one that powerful? Was there some kind of limit on their growth? Or was there some other issue? Lex could not help but turn to Leroy. He wanted to ask him, but this whole realm was limited to the realm of nascent soul, so it was unlikely he knew the answer. Pell, is there any particular reason why fairies don't grow stronger? Like, does the curse prevent them from becoming immortals? Because no matter how I think about it, their ability to have any affinity they want is too overpowered. They can even mix them in unusual ways just based on what they want. How is it possible that they can be so easily enslaved? I'm not sure. I never really paid too much attention to fairies in my previous life. After all, they were just insignificant slaves. But from my limited exposure to them, all I can say is that they have a very submissive and servile nature. Even if they become powerful, if they themselves are mentally weak, then that power is as good as useless. Lex frowned. This was an unusual situation, but Lex was almost certain that there was more to it than what he knew. But that was fine. Since he had a fairy clone now, this was one mystery he would enjoy uncovering. He was prepared to blast his way through, since the fairies couldn't really enter soul state, probably. He hadn't asked something like that yet. But as it turned out, he didn't need to. While the sealed domain underwent massive changes internally, it also brought about changes outside as well. Countless holes had appeared in the ground, going from the sealed domain all the way to the surface, making the region look like a massive wasp nest. He could not guess what exactly happened to the dirt, rock and everything else that had seemingly disappeared. He was sure it was fine, and that they probably had not been launched into the air like a volcanic eruption, but of dirt instead of lava. Realistically speaking, the sealed domain was bound to be discovered sooner or later, now that there was direct access to it from the ground. But there probably wouldn't be any problems. His fairy clone was still inside, so if the domain was invaded or something he would find out, and would do something about it. Maybe. On the plus side, he now confirmed that he was still connected to his clone even through the barrier of the domain. He began teleporting back towards the inn. Once he was back, Lex would relax until the resin was absorbed and see how much of a difference that made. In the meantime, he would begin marking down the other locations for the resin that he knew of. Finding them would be another task altogether. Chapter 1055 Vera never fails. Welcome to the Midnight Inn, Lex said to the weathered fairies behind him as they teleported to the Midnight Manor. Considering the fact that almost every place in this realm had the same level of purity to its spirit energy and air quality, the first impression wasn't overwhelming. But that is not what the fairies cared about anyway. They were immediately impacted by the warm, welcoming environment and the countless smiling faces. The presence of so many humans made them uncomfortable, but they sensed no hostility, and no one seemed to pay special attention to them, which actually put them at ease. Read latest novels at novelhall.com. Lex had planned to give them all a tour, but he was surprised to find that Vera had been pacing right in front of the manor impatiently. The moment he appeared, a massive grin appeared on her face and the oracle approached him at full speed. "I have something for you," she said with greater enthusiasm and excitement than Lex had ever seen her express. "Hurry and get free, I've already been waiting for you for hours." How many hours had she been waiting? If Lex were a betting man, he'd guess around the exact amount of time since he awoke his physique completely. He nodded, fully aware that the oracle had helped him too many times for him to ignore her. Although divination was not supposed to necessarily be completely accurate, she had been a very reliable partner for him any time she offered her services. "My friends, welcome to the Midnight Inn. I would have liked to take you on a tour personally, but duty beckons. I will leave you with one of our other staff members, and make sure your lodgings are taken care of. Feel free to explore after that. If you feel like you're beginning to like the inn and want to stay here permanently, let me know and I'll put in a good word for you and try to get you hired. If you want to move on, then you can do that as well. Please, do not be delayed on our behalf, great savior," one of the fairies said, before proceeding into a deep bow. Lex nodded, then found a worker at the manor and explained the situation, before making his way back to Vera, who was so excited it seemed like she had won the lottery. "What's gotten into you?" Lex couldn't help but ask. "You have no idea. Oh Lex, if I didn't already have a husband picked out for me in the future, I'd kiss you. You're like my lucky star. I don't know what you did, but the trajectory of my entire life changed a few hours ago. Come, follow me, quickly." Without explaining, the girl broke into a sprint, barely keeping her laughter contained. She had a golf cart parked nearby, and jumped into the driver's seat. "You know I can just teleport us where we need to go, right?" Lex asked as he sat beside her. I know, but the timing of these things matter. Don't worry about it. Let me fill you in on the details, I'm sure you're curious about what's happening." "Gee, I wonder what would make you think that." The thing did not speak, and neither did Vera. She simply bowed, out of respect, and walked in once it moved out of the way. Lex mimicked her, before following. He searched his memories about the guests in his inn, and quickly recalled who had seen. The floating tentacle creature was called Lend, and it had a companion it was staying with. Or, based on the fact that Lend was opening the door, maybe it was the companion. Inside the home, in the living room, sat a being of another race as well. This one was vaguely humanoid, though its body was extremely thin, and dark blue in color. It had no nose, and instead a majority of its face was occupied by a single, massive eyes. "Master Harash, I apologize for arriving without any warning," Vera said, and bowed even more deeply. "It is fine, child. Since I requested the staff not to share my location with anyone, you were able to find me on your own. Since that is that case, you have earned this audience. Please, take a seat. Master Harash, I come this time not for myself, but for my friend. He requires guidance on an extremely sensitive topic. Naturally, he will pay you for your help." Lex felt the urge to raise an eyebrow, but resisted. Vera had not failed him yet, so he continued to trust her. Harash turned to look at him, and then raised its monobrow in curiosity. Your destiny is hidden from me. How curious. I try to keep it like that, Lex said politely. I am not a fan of others looking into my future. Master Harash, that is exactly what my friend is here to learn. If you could guide him on the best ways to hide from karma, destiny, divination and any form of prying, then he will reward you appropriately. I will leave the room, so that I do not add on to the price. Master Harash nodded, as if permitting it. Vera bowed once more, and then walked out of the room, leaving them there. Lex was impressed. He had been looking for ways to hide his physique, and the way dropped into his lap. He should probably start thinking of how he would pay Vera in that case. Chapter 1056. A few minutes. Vera was a little strange sometimes, but she had proved herself extremely helpful time and time again. Lex would have offered her a job at the inn, but he suspected that she would have already requested it herself if she saw that in her future. At the same time, he could not help but turn his attention to her words. She told him that he would pay her multiple times for helping him out this time, which meant that this information would possibly help him out tremendously, and more than once. Based on her level of excitement, he would be paying her pretty vast sums. He turned his attention to Master Harash, who was similarly observing him with his one eye. The skinny alien was one of the guests whose cultivation level the system had not been able to tell him. Lex could not recall any other details about him. It had become somewhat of a habit to keep an overview of all the guests in the inn, but besides a few essential details, he didn't try to memorize anything more. After all, ordinarily, he could just pull up the system and scan the guest whenever he required. Except now that he had lost the abilities of his suit, and the system interface itself was down during the upgrade. Please, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Lex. It is an honor to meet you, Master Harash. Have a seat, child. Let us talk for a bit, get to know one another before we get down to business. I take it that, based on what I could see of that girl, she has not really shared much about me with you. We did not get the opportunity to talk in detail about this meeting. She just informed me that it was urgent that I come meet with you. She has done well. It is for the best that we naturally get to know one another. Allow me to introduce myself first. My name is Harash Sashi, and I am a practitioner of divination asceticism. This is a special school of thought that discourages divination and fortune-telling of any sort, and tries to cut all ties with destiny. But at the same time, I am not so strict. I believe in allowing things to follow along their natural progression. Basically, that means I have removed myself from an environment where I need to practice divination, or interfere in the machinations of fate. But if ever a need arises, I do not shy away from using my skills and knowledge. I see now how I can help you. What Vera asked of me is the best way I know of to hide from karma and destiny. Her request was too specific, which means that it is a little different from what I understand you need. You can choose for yourself if you wish to follow the path she has selected for you, or you wish for me to objectively decide how I can help you. Take care that I will not help for free, and a price will be collected for each. I will also only help you once, so choose carefully. Master Harash, Vera has known me for a long time, and has helped me countless times through numerous troubles. I have come to trust her judgment through personal experience. If she thinks that I need something very specific from you, then I trust her. Please, let me know what payment you seek. I will do my best to fulfill your needs. Very decisive and trusting. Those are good qualities you have nurtured, young man. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a discount just because I appreciate you. The information I have is extremely valuable, and offers the opportunity to hide completely and totally from the fetters of fate and karma. As such, the price is equally valuable. Fortunately for you, the information only leads to a chance at success, and even those chances are minuscule, which will greatly reduce the price. Of course, it is at the same time unfortunate for you as well, for it will be very difficult to actually achieve those results. To receive this information, you must deliver to me 100 drops of divine elixir, a drop of blood essence from the heart of a living dragon, a bottle of fairy dust attuned for rebirth and 3 drops of pure mountain milk, Harash became silent after stating his request, to give time for Lex to come to terms with the grand task he had laid before him. He believed that, eventually, he would be able to pay this price, but it would take many thousands of years of effort. That was fine, for things that came too easily were often under. "Can you give me a few minutes? I'll bring everything here now," Lex said, before teleporting away. He did not know if this was some kind of bizarre coincidence, or if Harash knew that Lex could literally pay with these things right now. Either way, the longest it would take him to get any of those items was the fairy dust, since he had to teleport back to the sealed domain. Meanwhile, Fairy Lex, who was still strengthening his ship, paused for a while to begin collecting the specific dust. But, how could he collect fairy dust? It was absorbed by everything it touched. He would need to consult the other fairies. Harash, who was prepared to give Lex some philosophical lectures about the value of persistence and determination in the face of seemingly impossible goals, froze. Did he say a few minutes? Chapter 1057 Jackpot. The first thing Lex did was teleport to Leroy. The fairies were still around the manor, and had actually moved towards the lake. They had never seen such a large body of water, and its soothing waves and clear waters attracted their weary minds. They had been prepared to begin their lives on the run, and a part of them still felt like they could not stay at the inn for too long. But the land was too beautiful, the waters too calming, the people too welcoming, which was already eroding their weakened willpower. Lex's sudden arrival startled the group, but he only waved at them, and hurried to turn to Leroy. "I have a small favor to ask you. Do you know how I can store fairy dust? Does it require some special material?" Fairy dust, like I've told you, is something similar to partially solidified spiritual energy. As soon as it touches something, it is absorbed into it. But storing it is also pretty simple. You either need material which is completely saturated with spiritual energy, and cannot absorb any more. High-quality spirit crystals can be used for this purpose, but they cannot be used to store fairy dust for long periods, as they will eventually lose their energy if they do not remain in a high-energy concentration area. The second is a material that is completely inert, and cannot absorb spiritual energy at all. That is much harder to find, but is better for long-term storage. Do you need some fairy dust? You can just say the word, and we will do what we can. Not for now, but if I need your help I'll let you know, responded Lex, before teleporting away once more. He did not need to store fairy dust for long anyway, so he would just make do with making a bottle out of spirit crystal. There was a small issue. Harash did not mention how big he wanted the bottle to be. Considering that this was supposed to be rare, he assumed it was not too big. After that, it was just a matter of teleporting everywhere he needed. All the ingredients were pretty simple to gather, and he decided to grab an extra drop of mountain milk for Vera as well. The fairy dust proved a small obstacle, mostly because Lex didn't know how to judge if what he was making was good enough. "Sit, child, sit," Harash suddenly said, putting all the items away. "Clearly you are in great need of this information, lest someone squish you one day. But the price has been paid, so you can only get what you paid for. The method I will teach you has the possibility of completely cutting off all ties of fate, karma, and such. That means if anyone wants to track you, they will have to use some other method, which is far from simple. But there is a drawback. This method is not strictly mobile, and cannot be on your person. It will require you to choose a place which will then be sealed off. The area does not have to be small, so you can potentially create a base or a proper home there. I thought that this might not best fit your needs, since if you ever need to escape you can always retreat to the inn, and that is essentially what that place will become. A refuge to where you can escape, unless you mean to start living there perpetually." Lex frowned for a moment. Indeed, that is not what he had imagined. But at the same time, he could think of more than a few reasons why such a thing might be useful. More importantly, although Vera might not know what problems he might face in the future, she foresaw him paying her multiple times for this. That meant that he really might end up needing a place to hide, besides the inn. The insinuations for that weren't good, if he was being honest. Why would he ever need to hide elsewhere, when he can retreat to the inn? Once it was in working condition, he could teleport to it from anywhere in the universe. Surely any refuge he created himself would not allow him the same convenience. The thought was troubling. But he would think more about it at a later time. For now, he turned his attention to Master Harash, his expression much more serious than it had been before. Since the Innkeeper has asked me to rely on my own abilities, then I must have the mental fortitude not to use the inn as my last form of defense. Even if it never happens, I need to at least prepare a safe place for myself with the intention of relying on it. Please, enlighten me about how I can go about building this protective layer. I assume it will require a lot of work. You have no idea, young man. The requirements to build it are far from simple. Just picking out the right location, the first hurdle, has defeated most who sought to build this. Give me your hand and close your eyes. I will begin transmitting all the information to you. This will take quite some time, so I hope you have nothing urgent coming up. Nothing that can't wait a bit, said Lex as he closed his eyes and prepared himself. Harash began transmitting some information to Lex, but before he even began to teach him just the requirements of this protective barrier, he had a lot of prerequisite knowledge he needed to teach Lex. On the bright side, Lex was receiving a crash course on many complicated topics. Since he had been so interested in learning new things lately, he had hit the jackpot. Chapter 1058 Cruising Through the Lands. 1058 Cruising Through the Lands. It almost felt like from the moment he had arrived at the Midnight Realm, Lex was being inundated by information. It was not the worst fate to suffer in the world. But it did keep him humble. After all, with his recent level up into the nascent realm, he felt like his mind had grown tremendously. He harbored no excessive pride about it. After all, to him it was just a fact. So then being continuously put in situations where his new level up, which was beyond anything he had ever experienced before, was repeatedly proven to be insufficient, was a nice way of reminding him that there were stronger beings than him in the universe. He honestly preferred such humbling methods to being chased across the forest by wolves, or running into random beings so powerful he did not even understand the scale of their power. He also learned that, when such a situation occurred, a part of his mind automatically shielded itself just enough to keep his fairy clone operating normally. Otherwise, it too would have been dropped into a stunned state. Since he did not know what to expect, he had his clone park the Jolly Rancher, but now it seemed unnecessary. So, while baby Lex was suffering from a massive information dump, Fairy Lex flapped his wings and brought his ship back into the air. He hadn't absorbed the entire tree into his ship, but the Jolly Rancher was strong enough as it was, and he felt bored. Instead of sitting around, which his other half was doing, he wanted to explore, so that's exactly what he did. The Jolly Rancher was only 2 feet 60 centimeters in length, so in the Midnight Realm, it was absolutely tiny, and unnoticeable as it flew through the skies. For the first day, Lex just enjoyed flying through the wilderness, watching nature and the natural order from his ship up in the air, but on the second day, he decided to get closer. He had reached a grassland now, with grass that rose at nearly 5 feet, 1.5 meters, high, so he brought the ship to just above the grass, giving the illusion that it was sailing through the field of green. A natural consequence of coming down was that he attracted the attention of the local wildlife. A leopard which had been using the grass as cover leaped out of it with speed that should have been beyond his level, and tried to take the ship down. Naturally, it failed. Although Fairy Lex was not physically strong, its control over spiritual energy had grown tremendously. Moreover, he did not need techniques. He just had to think about how he wanted to use the energy for. So, he just conjured large hands in the air, scooped the leopard, and then flung it far across the grasslands. Hopefully, it would learn its lesson. A quick scan revealed that inside the submarines were actually termites, who were lying dormant as they traveled. It was strange that they were ignoring the trees down below, and instead traveling through the river that constantly changed its path as it wished, so Lex actually brought his ship down from the river to investigate. A chill went through his body as he neared the trees, and he suddenly realized that the trees were not actually there. Instead, they were just images, or illusions of trees. It was like a memory of what once existed here. Lex investigated the images some more with his spirit sense and then discovered something interesting. These weren't strictly images, they were ghosts. He was not sure if each individual tree was a ghost, or this was just one massive ghost of a forest that once existed, but he could tell that the trees here had suffered a tremendous slaughter, and left behind such a resentment, that even the flowing waters refused to flow through the lands. Lex wondered if it was the termites that did the slaughtering, or something else. But there was no answer for him there. No matter how he searched, he could learn nothing more, so eventually, he was forced to move on. That's when he first encountered a region of total darkness. It wasn't that there weren't any burning orbs in the sky, there were, but the light from them could not enter the region. It was as if there was a blanket around it that blocked out specifically just the light from those orbs and nothing else. Naturally, Lex had to investigate. The Jolly Rancher flew directly into the darkness, unimpeded as it went. The dark region was not devoid of life, and instead, featured a rich ecosystem with a completely diverse set of creatures. There were insects, birds, animals, and other things that all thrived in the darkness. Among them all, surprisingly, Lex found a human settlement. It was illuminated by torches, and gave off a cozy vibe, rather than the dreary one Lex would have expected. It was strange for them to choose to live in the darkness, though. Naturally, his ever-present curiosity meant that Lex wanted to investigate, but this time he would have to be more discreet. He parked the Jolly Rancher in a natural cave that he discovered, then walked out. One problem with being a fairy was that it wasn't discreet. His fairy dust glowed very visibly in the dark, so if he were to fly he would be spotted immediately. Yet if he walked, he wouldn't get far. It also wasn't conducive to staying hidden. So Lex naturally concluded that the first order of business was to get a mount, and he had spotted a particular creature on the way that would be perfect for the job. Carefully, and quietly, Lex snuck through the darkness until he reached a forest. Lex didn't question how the trees grew without light. Instead, he just searched the branches for the mount he had selected, and then quickly found one. There, nestled on one of the branches, stood a baby owl, its wide eyes searching the forest for prey. It was the perfect size to serve as Fairy Lex's mount, so he began to climb the tree, doing his best not to get spotted as he approached. Chapter 1059 Shadow Plane. The baby owl's body was only slightly larger than Lex's own, but that did not mean it was not a good fit. Its body carried a hidden strength that had been tucked in, to keep it from detection while it searched for enemies. But that could not hide it from Lex, who was beginning to gain a lot of experience in such things. Even without the need for spirit sense, Lex could tell, based solely on its lush plumage and the way that energy flowed around it, how tough and durable it was. It did not move much, as it tried to remain still and blend into the darkness, but its massive eyes revealed its inner shrewdness. No, the minor size difference would not deter it from being a good mount. Taming it, though, might be a small issue. Long ago, Lex had learned a taming technique. It was, in fact, the one he used on Fenrir. But he was not interested in formally taming the owl. Just a temporary agreement would do. If he were in his normal body, he would turn himself into thought, enter the bird's mind, and communicate with it. But in his fairy body, none of that was possible. It was really strange, because he did not think his abilities were linked to his body, but his soul. Yet it became an issue, not because of the body, but because his race had changed. If his clone had been another human, this would not have been a problem. But, as a fairy, there were other ways in which he could resolve this issue. He walked right up to the owl, remaining undetected, then put his arm around its neck, as if he was talking to any old friend. The owl jerked, but then froze. In his fairy form there were many things Lex lacked, but that did not eliminate his knowledge. This body did not have domination, but it did have an aura. Lex, with some knowledge and experience in controlling auras now, used it on the calm and friendly aura that fairies naturally exuded, and added a hint of his power in it. His fairy body was at the peak of the foundation realm, but that did not change the fact that his soul was at the nascent level. Although in his fairy body, it seemed to be in a pseudo-nascent state, it was enough to intimidate anyone. The owl wanted to react to the sudden hand, but its body would not respond as it was completely restricted by the aura. Lex flapped his wings, thinking of communication and translation, and allowed the fairy dust to be absorbed by his own body and that of the owls. The reason the universal translator did not work on animals, and certain beasts such as Fenrir, was because they were not speaking in any language, even if they did communicate. But connecting through souls, something being in the nascent soul realm allowed, could enable communication between any two things with souls. "How are you doing, friend? I hope I'm not interrupting anything too important." The owl turned its head sideways as it tried to understand what was happening. It looked at Lex, its tiny bird brain trying to grasp the situation. "I was scouring the abyss for worthy prey, aiming to assist it in fulfilling its role in the food chain," it responded. It was interesting because Lex heard it hoot, but at the same time he also understood what it was trying to say. Lex was beginning to get very impressed by this owl, until he realized that to the owl, the trees in the city were the monuments. It flew to each and every park, and took some time to describe the history and relevance of each tree, as if it had everything memorized. While that was interesting as well, especially since the trees had apparently been the sites of a colossal war between the great horde of undead insects and the black doves, he was more interested in the people themselves. Up close, he finally saw them, and realized the skin color of these humans was unexpected. They had ashen skin, with their pupils shining white in the dark. To be honest, Lex felt like he was at a comic convention because they looked more like they were undead than living humans, but nothing about their auras suggested anything was amiss. Their glowing eyes did not seem to grant them dark vision, as they usually all carried lanterns with them. Besides their unusual skin color, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so Lex turned his attention from the settlement to the owl's estate, and asked Ollie if it could give him a tour of its home. The owl seemed almost too eager to agree, and just as Lex was preparing himself for a small journey, Ollie did something strange. It turned and twisted inside space itself, suddenly transporting them to an entirely different plane. For a moment, Lex was extremely disoriented, but a single flap of his fairy wings was all it took for him to gather himself back up. He looked around and discovered that his eyes were useless here. He was in pure darkness. Or rather, everything was just colored black. "Welcome to the dominion of the Shadow Talons, the Shadow Plane," said Ollie, though it had no voice. The words just sort of came into existence as smaller shadows which were then absorbed by Lex's body, allowing him to understand. "From here, our rule extends to every corner and dark domain of the realm. The mighty Shadow Talon dynasty will become the ultimate ruler of the lands." Then Lex saw was the wrong word. He somehow became aware of the countless shadows that existed around him. For as far he could sense, and far beyond that even, a massive military compound seemed to stretch out. Millions and millions of owls moved about, each of them moving with the discipline and focus of a well-trained army. Weapons and vehicles littered the shadows, and from each of them reeked an aura of blood, or a bloody shadow, if that made sense. For the first time, Lex suddenly became aware of this massive army that was hiding in every single shadow that existed in the entire Midnight Realm, and he could not wrap his head around how an entire dynasty could exist connected solely by shadows. And yet, somehow, here it was, and of course, he just stumbled into it. Then Lex something dangerous in the distance. A shadow suddenly approached them, and it had an aura similar to his own. This shadow was at the nascent realm. Chapter 1060 Not How to Treat Guests. Lex felt no fear surrounded by millions of soldiers and an unknown owl coming towards him who was in the same realm as him. Even before he reached the nascent realm, he did not take foes at the nascent realm too seriously. Even though he was in his fairy body, which he was not entirely familiar with, and was nowhere near the peak of his power, he was absolutely confident. In fact, he was even confident about the fact that what he was feeling was appropriate, and it was not overconfidence. If, after everything he had faced and overcome, he could not face such a tiny challenge, then he should feel ashamed. One thing Lex realized was that, though most of his abilities became inert in this form, he still had his sword intent, which was one more reason to make it stronger. An owl suddenly appeared in front of them, the aura of its realm wrapped around it like protective armor, and it glared down at Lex and Ollie. How dare you desecrate the back of a noble shadow talon? Are you ignorant of the magnitude of your trespass? Lex would have expected to face a massive owl. Technically speaking, compared to Lex's body, it was. But in reality, it was just the size of a normal owl. Relax, we have a temporary agreement. He is just giving me a tour of his estate. This is not really the appropriate way to talk to guests, you know? Your justification falls short. I shall exact retribution for your transgression. Ollie panicked, and was about to defend Lex. The large owl also gathered its energy to strike down Lex. Before either of them could do anything, Lex flapped his wing. Or rather, he wiggled the shadow that was his wing. The result was sufficient. Motes of shining fairy dust appeared, dazzling the infinite plane of shadow, attracting the attention of every living being that exhibited the plane. What they saw was a shadow disappear from the back of Ollie, and reappear on the back of the threatening owl. Lex extended his hand forward, coated in his sword intent, and grabbed the back of its neck right below its skill, freezing it in place. Lex was completely unaffected by its power. Instead, his warm and happy aura was radiating off of him, forming a complete dichotomy from the scene that unfolded everyone. I said, this is not how one talks to guests. But it wasn't the best idea to offend a massive dynasty while he was trying to keep his fairy clone hidden, so he had to think of a way to de-escalate things. There, I guess I'm not your guest anymore. I think we should find a way to talk things out. There's no reason to make enemies needlessly. You speak with wisdom. Mutual benefit awaits us through a shared understanding. Yet, to proceed, you must first consent to one of our conditions, said an owl with brown feathers that carried streaks of white in them. It looked kind of cool, Lex had to admit. No, focus on its words, not its coolness. What condition? I have to remind you that I was attacked unprovoked, so if your condition is too demanding, I might not feel like obliging. The owl sighed, as if it was not caught in a tense situation, but rather an annoying one. The truth is, we shadow talents boast a rich and illustrious lineage. Riding upon one's back without earning the honor is a grievous affront. Unless you undergo our rites of passage, many shadow talons, particularly the elders, will not forgive this offense, despite any pleas. However, should you complete the rites successfully, earning the approval of our entire race, you will not only gain recognition but also our friendship. Lex rubbed his chin and thought about it. So you're saying if I pass through these rites, I can explore your dynasty without any issues? That sounds interesting. But you also have to understand. I was provoked even though I was being friendly. The shadow talons might be proud, but I am not someone who can be accosted easily either. How can you make this up to me? If Lex gave in too easily, it would actually reduce his prestige in the eyes of others. Instead, making them pay a heavy but not unbearable price would actually make them feel relieved that he agreed to go along with their rites. Although it might seem simpler to just directly agree to go through the rites, if he portrayed himself as weak, then who knows if problems would follow him. This was a common mistake many characters in novels, especially the MC in God's Call Me Daddy made, which is why they got attacked continuously. They didn't create proper deterrence. The owl underneath Lex's feet struggled a bit, as if it wanted to speak, but Lex kept him thoroughly suppressed. This guy was trouble, so it was best if he kept his mouth shut. We uphold our traditions, so it makes sense that you do yours. We acknowledge the breach that occurred, since you declared yourself a guest when you came. I trust we can reach a resolution. A small round of negotiations took place, and Lex remained unperturbed even as thousands of owls appeared around him, as if there was no pressure on him to accept. As if they were not strong enough to sway him. It was easy, since it was true. Chapter 1061 Midnight Castle Blueprint. Lex put up a tough front during negotiations, and at the same time inquired about the rites of passage. But in truth, he did not care too much. The rites of passage were interesting, and Lex would have gone through it just to see what the experience was like. But mostly, his mind was on the glyph. When he got time, he would learn more glyphs and practice them to see what the results were like. Moreover, if his theory was correct where fairies could just replicate special techniques or abilities that were unique to various races because they had all affinities, then fairies would be overpowered to a whole other level. In fact, they might even be the most impressive race he had met yet. In that case, he was 100% sure that there was something else holding back their growth than just a curse that made them more likely to be enslaved. It was something he needed to figure out, since he had no intention of staying weak. Eventually, Lex ended up getting a better deal than he expected. Alongside various treasures, they agreed to take Lex to a unique place within the realm that could only be accessed through the shadow plane. Off the top of his head, he could not recall any such place in the realm. But then again, he received a lot of information about it, and it was incredibly difficult to wield all that knowledge properly. In fact, one of the reasons why Lex could still enjoy exploring was because unless he actively tried to recall some information about a place, and it was actually in front of him, he would have a tough time recalling it. That was also why he had to go through so much effort to find the resin. But he was sure he would recognize the place once he went there. Even so, it was an interesting offer, and since the only thing fair Lex had on his agenda at the moment was to adventure and enjoy, he didn't mind accepting such an offer. As such, they came to an agreement. If Lex could pass the rites, he'd be forgiven and not be targeted, and would get his compensation in that case. If he did not, then the owls would not hold back any who wanted to act out against him. Not that Lex felt threatened by such a thing. It would just be highly inconvenient being hunted by his own shadow. One more reason he was looking forward to completing the rite was because the owls agreed to help enchant the Jolly Rancher in such a fashion that it could be stored within his own shadow. That would be very convenient. So both the Lexes became busy with their own individual tasks, living completely independent lives. At some point, Fairy Lex realized he'd need a new name, just to avoid any correlation or connection with his main self, even if it was minor. But the prospect of giving himself a new name seemed very serious. Since he could not come up with a good one at the moment, he decided to postpone it until he had an epiphany. If ever, for any reason, Lex faced a formidable opponent who killed him, or if ever he was discovered as someone who was actually weak and not as strong as the Innkeeper portrayed, then he could recover using this setup. The greatest part was that even if he were attacked by a curse, or a law, or anything which could trace his destiny or karma or anything along those lines, the attack would not make its way back to that single drop of soul blood. He had been thinking about his plan for a long time, and was one of the reasons why he didn't want any connection between his fairy clone and his main body. This way he could use his fairy clone to create his entire setup, all the while undetected and leaving behind no clues. Since this concerned his potential survival, he wanted to take no chances at all. Upon thinking so far, Lex checked his system interface. He had been distracted for a while, so it was completely possible that it had returned, and indeed it had. New notification: ingredient amber chaos resin consumed. System recovery boosted by 5%. Addition of new features unsuccessful due to insufficient energy. Use of the same ingredient in the future will result in severe loss of efficiency and diminishing returns. System functionality, 28%. Lex could not help himself from grinning. An entire 5% increase. That was greater than anything he had experienced before. Harash, who was watching Lex, assumed that he was extremely pleased with the information he had attained. I am glad that you are satisfied with the results of this exchange. But be aware that I will not do the same in the future. To have me help you, whether it is through divination or the passing on of knowledge, is not something that can be sought for. Only through natural and unprompted occurrence on both our parts can it be achieved. Also, please, in the future, do not reveal the location of where I am staying to anyone. I value my privacy, and I am here on vacation. Worry not, Master Harash. My lips are sealed. No one will ever know of our exchange. Actually, that is true. Once you leave, Lend and I both will go deposit the knowledge of what information you purchased in the Chamber of Secrets. Even we will not know what knowledge you have gained from me. Lex nodded gratefully. This was something he had thought of, but felt awkward asking for. It seemed like Master Harash was a master for a reason. Chapter 1062. Tell me more. Once he finished up with Master Harash, Lex walked out to find Vera waiting for him. Originally, he was planning on giving her a drop of mountain milk as her payment, but it was only now that he had received the information did he realize that it was nowhere near enough. This put him in a bit of a pickle. Vera grinned as she saw Lex struggling to decide what to pay her with. This was something she had already foreseen, and was looking forward to enjoying. Before I pay you, is there anything specific you need? It might be better to help you out rather than give you random rewards. Nope, I'm good, she said, and then flashed a bright smile. Lex groaned, then gave her the drop of mountain milk. This is your advance payment. Give me some time, I'll need to figure out what else I can use to pay you. Vera happily grabbed the vial that contained the drop and said, no worries. It'll take me a few days to absorb this anyway. That reminded Lex that even he had not gotten around to absorbing a drop of this yet. Now might be a nice time. But he had a few things he wanted to think about first. He used an illusion to change his appearance and teleported over to the makeshift restaurant being run by Kenta. He wanted to see how good the food was while he considered some things, so he ordered some food and grabbed a table. He read his latest notifications once more. The resin could still be used, but it would not provide nearly as much of a boost as the first time. The fact that it would give diminishing returns was also somewhat of a concern. That meant that he had to possibly look for other items that the system might be able to absorb. It was not so easy to come up with those since the resin itself turned out to be a Tao-level ingredient. How many of those could there be in a new realm? He had no idea. But while he thought of alternatives, he needed to find the next piece of resin anyway. The reduced effectiveness might still be worth it. He then thought about setting up the Midnight Castle. The problem with that was that even its simplest and cheapest item used in its blueprint was extremely rare and precious, so much so that the Infinity Emporium did not even have them, and only put him on a contact list, meaning they would notify him if they got their hands on what he needed. He also took some time to meet all the other workers, from Velma to Luther and Gerard. Running the inn now that the innkeeper was not going to be around was a massive responsibility, and so he wanted to make sure there were no issues. There is a group gathering outside the boundary wall towards the south, Gerard told Lex. It's not a matter for concern, they haven't done anything to show that they might be hostile, but the group is growing. In fact, signs seem to indicate that they're setting up to create a small town right outside the inn. I don't know what their intentions are, but I brought it up to Luther. He is worried they might be targeting any future guests coming from that direction. We'll need to keep an eye on them. Do you want me to go check it out? Lex asked. No, not yet. Unless they do something that provokes the inn, we've decided to just let them be. After all, they're not on inn territory. They're free to do as they please. If they make contact, we'll be sure to cater to their needs. Seems like you have things handled, Lex said, and was about to head out when he noticed a look of hesitation on Gerard's face. Is there something else you need help with? He asked, concerned. Gerard was one of his most reliable workers. Anything that gave him pause was not something he could overlook. There's a small matter, but it's not related to the inn. It's a private matter. I don't know if I should waste your nonsense, Lex said, and suddenly summoned a couple of drinks, passing one to Gerard. I know we don't spend much time with each other besides work, but we're basically family at this point. Go ahead, tell me what's bothering you. Well, you probably know, back in my early days, I was a chauffeur for the golf carts. Although I don't do that anymore, on my off days, I like to take the old wheels for a spin. Naturally. It's a nice hobby. Well, yesterday, I met someone on the racetrack near the village who was quite the driver. It was a close call, I barely beat her. But afterwards, she invited me out on a date. Usually, I politely reject such offers. But I don't know why, yesterday I just felt a strange feeling in my chest. I didn't want to reject her. As if summoned by some holy magic, Velma suddenly appeared beside them. Tell me more. Chapter 1063 Intentions. 1063 Intentions. Lex was, for once, genuinely surprised by something that happened inside the inn. He had not sensed Velma's arrival at all. He was even more surprised when he realized that he had sensed a spatial ripple. "Did you just use teleportation? Since when can you teleport?" he asked, unable to hold himself back. "Why, yes, I did. Many of the inn workers have a mild space affinity, so Z has been holding lessons on and off. I listened to a few here and there, though I wasn't too interested. Until about a few seconds ago. My gut was telling me something important was going on, and I reacted. Next thing I knew, I stumbled upon Gerard here rekindling his youthful spirit." The mature-looking worker didn't blush, but he did scratch his head out of embarrassment. "You have sharp instincts," Lex said, admiringly. "But do not make Gerard conscious. He's a hard-working man, and he deserves to enjoy the attention of a lady if he so chooses." "Of course," said Velma, as she pulled up a chair and grabbed a drink herself as well. "Of course he does. I'm all for it. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, he's already waited too long. But that's besides the point. Gerard, go on. Pretend like I'm not here." The fellow did just that, and after clearing his throat just a bit, he turned back towards Lex. "Like I was saying, I was enjoying the tracks on my off day. It's been a while since a good race, so I was enjoying just doing laps when she suddenly pulled up and challenged me to a race. Naturally, I was up for it. It was a good, thrilling race. Honestly, like I was saying, I was enjoying the tracks on my off day. It could have been anybody's win. Afterwards, I went over to commend the other racer for a good match, and that's how I met Lilith." "That seems great. You two share a hobby, and clearly you're interested in her." "I don't see what you're struggling with," Lex commented. Lex's jaw dropped. Did Gerard just set up a double date? Was he getting set up? On a blind date no less. "Gerard, why would you bring someone else on your date?" "So that you can show us how it's done." Lilith also confessed that she's never been on a date either, since she never had the time before. Her friend, apparently, does not have as much dating experience as someone like you, but she might be able to help. Velma's eyes were gleaming. Clearly she understood the situation better than Gerard, but she said nothing to hint that the old worker had blundered. Instead, she gave Lex a knowing grin. Lex sighed. This was not how he imagined his first date in forever starting out. Where was the love at first sight? The saving the damsel from a suppressive family? The dragon that held her in a tower? Well then, Gerard, the first thing you need to know is that even in casual attire, you cannot be sloppy. Let's walk over to Jeeves while we talk. We probably don't have a lot of time, and there are many things I want to cover. First of all, what are your intentions with Lilith, young man?" "My intentions?" he repeated, confused. "Indeed, your intentions. You can't just drive up to a girl in your fancy golf cart and expect her to drop everything and join you in long circuit races. You have to take things at a reasonable pace. Maybe some backstreet racing, or a short ride over the lawn to start things out. See how you both feel on different kinds of terrain. After all, it would be a shame if there's a great connection on the tarmac, but that flame fizzles out if you get on some dirt roads." I see. You're talking about assessing compatibility." "Yes. Are you looking for a long-term racing partner, or just someone to casually burn rubber with on the weekends?" "Your intentions. Let me tell you now, it's not very polite to lead a lady on, thinking you're going to go on a 1,000-lap race, but then disappear after a couple of quick drag races." Chapter 1064 Planning a Date. "I will be honest, Lex, I hadn't thought about this," Gerard said as he brushed his goatee with his hands. "Dating is a topic I never really gave much thought to at all. But at that moment, when she asked me out, I felt like it was a good idea, and agreed. As for the future, well, besides how to improve the inn, I've never really thought about much else." "There's nothing wrong with that," Lex said with a tone of confidence, as if he had thoroughly mastered the art of relationships. It's perfectly fine to not have all the answers at the moment. Right now, you are in the beginning stages, so all you really need to see is if you enjoy each other's company. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, and act naturally. But if things go well, and you guys decide to continue dating, then you definitely should mention it. This is important so that you two can identify if you both have the same thing in mind. Having different expectations is not a problem, but hiding your expectations from one another is not a good foundation to build a relationship on. What about you? What do you want? Gerard asked, looking at Lex. He froze. What did he want? My situation is a little different. You caught me unaware. Usually, when you invite someone on a double date, they already know about it, and are open to it. For now, all I want is to accompany you and make sure everything goes well. As for the long term, I'm not sure. I have too much work to do. The Innkeeper has given me many tasks. I don't think I'll have time for a long, committed relationship. After all, I never know where I'm going to be from one day to the next. My cultivation realm is also rapidly rising as a result of all my work. It would be awkward if I start dating someone in the nascent realm, and in 10 years become an immortal. Then, in another 100 years I become a heavenly immortal, all the while she is still stuck as a nascent realm cultivator. I don't know if that will affect the dynamic between us much, but it might get awkward. You thought a lot about this, it seems, Gerard commented. Does a large gap in realms usually hamper relationships? This sit for updates. Well, I've not dated since I started to cultivate, so I'm not sure. But I imagine it creates a divide. You've felt yourself the difference between realms of power. You must have perceived the world differently when you were weaker compared to when you were stronger. So similarly, I imagine, if the cultivation gap is too large, then it becomes hard to understand one another. Of course, I bet people overcome such things all the time as well. If it's true love, then I'm sure both people will overlook any differences. Why is everyone here? Lex asked, suddenly staring at Velma. I thought everyone could give suggestions, she said innocently. Date ideas, you know. Not bad, Gerard said with a nod. With more minds, we can think of better ideas. Lex was just suggesting we take the Silent Wanderer to a spot a little distance from here where there is a wonderful natural dirt track we can use for a small race. Afterwards, we were considering having a picnic by an enchanted lake. That sounds too tame, Luther said seriously. You should go hunting so you can display your martial prowess. Whatever you do, don't forget to style your hair first. Your attire won't count for much if your own hair is all over the place, said Harry. I agree with Luther. Back when Gawain was courting me, we used to go on conquests all the time, and conquered many enemy nations. It really strengthened the bonds between us, said Anita, as she lovingly rubbed her slightly protruding belly. The Lich's charm was recently growing, taking on a motherly glow. I think one of you should play music for them, or maybe both, Z said, shyly. From time to time, he would glance at Sandra, and everyone in the room besides the girl herself noticed his interest in her. Forget all of them. You need to go to the beach. Since you're getting to know one another, it's very important you go to the beach to really get to know one another better. She was pretending to know exactly what she was insinuating, but Lex's spirit sense could see the chit full of random pieces of advice she had hidden behind her back. It seemed like she had copied them from a magazine. Chapter 1065. You've kept me waiting. So we're in agreement? Luther asked, looking at the group. There needs to be an element of danger and excitement. But we're going to avoid any conquests or hunting, and somehow tie in racing. In that case, I think the location of the newly discovered Warpal colony should serve perfectly. Yes. That's perfect. Why didn't I think of that, exclaimed Z, but we'll need modified golf carts for that. There's no way regular golf carts can drive over that rocky terrain. There are also icy caverns nearby. That can be a perfect spot for a nice meal afterwards, Velma added. Better yet if they have a meal waiting for them when they reach. I'll take care of that. She teleported away, making use of the ability she had only just recently learned. I'll go get the carts from Xion, Z said, and dashed away. I'll make sure to add a small surprise to the track. Keep the excitement up, said Luther and walked away. I'll make sure there are no sentient trees or rocks nearby to spy on our date, Sandra said, before running away herself as well. I'll get you the new communication devices that the Midnight Portal has been giving out. This way you can message each other after the dates are over, commented Anita. But instead of going anywhere herself, she just commanded one of her undead servants to do the task. Over the past half hour the entire group had reworked the date Lex had meticulously designed, and it was with great reluctance that he admitted their plan might actually be better. But only because it drew inspiration from his own plan idea. That was surprisingly brilliant, in its own way. Lex looked at Gerard, studying him deeply. Was this really his first date ever? Maybe the original person he had been cloned from was some kind of Casanova. They hopped in a golf cart, and Gerard drove them all the way to the well. This was the first time Lex spent some time having a casual conversation with the man, and discovered that he was really missing out. Talking to Gerard was like talking to an educated scholar, and because his bloodline allowed him unique ways to control energy through items, his perspective about energy was also quite different. As much as he enjoyed relaxing back in the sealed domain, maybe next time he wanted to relax, he should do it with his workers at the inn. There was no need to always spend time alone. Looks like they're waiting for us, Gerard said, as he drifted his golf cart across the lawn, coming to a stop in the perfect parking location. Lex followed Gerard's gaze, and spotted another golf cart occupied by two devils. Upon spotting Gerard, one of them lit up, and quickly stepped out, revealing her high heel, long leather boots. The hem of her high-waisted pants were tucked into her boots, and its black fabric looked extremely flattering as it tightly hugged her legs. She was wearing a white t-shirt, the base of which ended just as it met her pants, and she was wearing a leather jacket atop it, though she left the zip open. Her bright red hair was tied into a ponytail, and matched perfectly with deep red lipstick. Gerard, she said softly, as if tasting the name on her tongue. You've kept me waiting. Chapter 1066 Oozing Charisma. Gerard, who moments ago had been struggling with the fact that he was not wearing a tie of a blazer, forgot his troubles at the sight of Lilith. My apologies for making you wait, he said, as he gave a light bow to show his sincerity. I'll make it up to you in our next race by waiting at the finish line. Lex's eyebrows shot up. So aggressive. Clearly this man had no shyness issue at all, so what did he need a wingman for? Shaking his head, Lex got off the cart as well and looked over to the other lady who was supposed to be his date. Unlike Lilith, who was dressed in black and had red hair, his date was wearing a long, red dress and had pitch black hair that had been tied up in a bun. Her fair skin was free of any blemishes, and she looked quite enchanting in her dress. More importantly, he could tell by the way she stood that she was strong. No, Lex. Don't assess the battle capabilities of your date. It was something he had to remind himself. He would have tried to scan her, but his system was once again offline since he had absorbed the newfound system just a short while ago to continue the repairing process, not that he needed it. He could have recalled any information he wished to if only he focused on it. But he chose not to do that. He stepped up beside Gerard, who had taken Lilith's hand and kissed it. My goodness, the man was oozing charisma. Ah, Lilith, allow me to introduce you. This is my friend, Lex. Do not let appearances fool you, he only became like this after being crushed by the void while rescuing me and a few others. He should return to his normal self soon enough. Lex, it's a pleasure to meet you, Lilith said with an admiring smile. This is my childhood friend, Cindy. Cindy and Lex quickly caught up with the two lovebirds, who hadn't noticed that they had fallen back at all. A welcoming gift is the opening move in a courtship. It is supposed to be a symbolic representation of the relationship two will share if it comes to blood. Normally, great care is taken to address each aspect of it, as its insinuation can be extremely nuanced. But to leave such a thing in the hands of fate, it is incredibly bold. I am looking forward to seeing what you fish out. how exciting. Unfortunately, the fishing well is technically not working in its full capacity since everything in the inn is still getting used to the new realm. But, in preparation for this, I had someone commission a replica of the well. We'll have to see how it works out. Indeed, all the inn services besides the rooms were not really working, so Gerard had requested John and Xian to help him in this endeavor. They had created a well for him to use, though how well it worked was still to be seen. The fact that the services weren't working was also one of the reasons Lex hadn't been in a rush to ask Master Harash to go to the Chamber of Secrets. Gerard stepped forward, reluctantly pulling his hand from Lilith's, and grabbed the fishing rod that was placed beside it. He activated the well, and then, without an ounce of nervousness or hesitation, threw in the hook. "I have a small confession, Lilith," Gerard said as he continued to roll open the reel, letting the hook sink lower into the well. "This well might not be as random as I originally let on. After all, how can someone recreate the work of the Innkeeper?" "Oh? So then you did plan what you'll be giving me?" "Well, I selected a few options. Which one comes out is still up to chance," he said, then suddenly yanked the line, pulling out the entire reel in one smooth motion. At the end of it, in the hook, were car keys. Chapter 1067 Tuk Tuk. Lex watched with a troubled look as Gerard dramatically fished out the car keys. He wondered if it was such a good idea to let him do this. If the old fellow ever learned about the viscous power he wielded so easily, he may soon become the playboy of the Midnight Inn. It was always obvious to him that Gerard liked racing. From the looks of it, the same was true for Lilith. If Gerard had, with great foresight, arranged for the gift to be some kind of bike, like maybe a heavy bike or a chopper or something along those lines, then his instincts for this kind of stuff was absolutely lethal. Lex did not mean to stereotype, but Lilith looked like the kind of girl who enjoyed riding bikes, so he didn't imagine there would be any issue there. He could already visualize the old man riding across the inn, with Lilith hugging him from the back, holding him tightly as he drifted across all kinds of terrain. A part of Lex wanted to start taking lessons from Gerard. If he had been half as suave as Gerard, he'd already be married by now, not that Lex wanted to get married or anything. He could see the excitement in Lilith's eyes as she saw the keys. Really well played. At this point, he wouldn't be surprised if Gerard even had the bike customized, not that it was confirmed if it was a bike yet. "Oh my, keys. How promising. What are they for?" Lilith asked, as she ran up to Gerard. "I got us a bike," Gerard said as he handed her the keys. "One of our guests was talking to me about it. Apparently, back on Earth, this was one of the fastest and most dangerous bikes on the road. I had Xian make it for me. The poor fellow is constantly swamped with work, but still, he never says no." "Where is it? Do we have to go to it?" "Oh, no, all we need to do is. Once you bond with it, it will automatically make an entry every time you have an experience you find worth remembering. In a few centuries, who knows how many small moments you'll forget, but with this, you can then look back in the book and enjoy." Lex paused. That actually sounded very nice. He made a mental note to get one for himself. He doubted he'd ever forget what it was like to swim through lava, but he might forget the feeling he got when he experienced something new for the first time. He didn't want all his good memories to be overshadowed by his traumas. This was something he really needed to get for himself. "It's amazing, I love it," Gerard exclaimed as he took the notebook and bounded to himself immediately. Before he could even do anything, writing began to enter right in front of him, marking down the time Lilith gave him a wonderful gift. Since the book was open, everyone read it at the same time, and the memory was written in such cute words, it immediately created an adorable environment. Lex pulled Cindy aside to the well, giving the couple a moment of privacy. "Allow me to fish something out for you as well," Lex said as he walked towards the well. "I thought we were just going to observe the two," Cindy said, though she made no move to stop Lex. "We are, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy ourselves in the meantime. Besides, if I see any more than I'm seeing right now, I might need to put up a parental advisory," Lex said as he looked towards Gerard and Lilith. They were still reading something in the journal, and whispering amongst themselves. He turned his sight back towards the well, then dropped a few items in as well. He grabbed the fishing rod. It was time to see how his luck was. Chapter 1068 right now. Wait, let me add a few things too. Cindy exclaimed, before throwing in some things. Despite her nonchalance, she truly seemed excited about this. Lex briefly wondered about devil dating culture. Even though he had read up about them, this was a topic he didn't particularly know much about. They were surprisingly relaxed about seeing a human, even though humans were considered to have lower potential than devils, because of the cosmic ascendance spectrum. But maybe Lilith and Cindy in particular didn't care about it, not that he was on a real date with Cindy. They had agreed, they were just watching the other two. After Cindy moved away, Lex threw in the hook and let the line loosen. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to do anything else, so he waited for a few moments. It seemed that he didn't have to do anything else, because after a moment the line tightened, and he quickly fished out whatever he had hooked. Lex had to admit, there was a tinge of excitement and anticipation that filled him as he wondered what he caught. Wait, was that the appeal of fishing? Was he on the path to becoming a fisherman? Before he could find an answer, he managed to pull out the item. Hanging there tantalizingly was a pint of chocolate fudge brownie ice cream. Not bad at all, said Lex as he gave the pint to Cindy. It had been a while since he had ice cream. Isn't this breakup food? I've seen the TV shows. Cindy said as she grabbed the pint, unsure of what to feel. It seemed that fate was sending clear hints. But that was fine, they weren't on a date anyway. They were just having fun and passing the time. That was it. Cindy grabbed the fishing rod from Lex and repeated the process a little forcefully. It seemed that maybe she wasn't too satisfied with the gift she got. A few moments later, she caught something and pulled out a nondescript rectangle wooden box. At a glance, neither of them could tell what it was, so Cindy grabbed it to take a closer look. Oh hey, it opens up, she said, as she lifted the top. Revealed within was the figure of a petite ballerina that began dancing once the lid was opened, with gentle music playing in the background. 6 hiltless swords hovered around Alexander, drawing in spiritual energy, and converting into something else, before depositing it in his body. Now that he had finally reached the nascent realm, he could finally begin to show the real effects of his cultivation technique. His grandparents, before disappearing on their 39th honeymoon, had sent him a ticket that said Champions Tourney. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew they wouldn't have sent it if it wasn't important. Raphael Carter Bravi, son of King Marlowe, opened his eyes with a stunned daze. It took him a few hours to regain awareness, and when he did, the first thing he did was check the date. I went back in time again, he muttered. No, wait. I probably saw the future again. Damn, I don't know how accurate this is, but I need to enter the Champions Tourney. Larry opened his eyes and found himself in a spaceship scrapyard. Countless metal rods were cutting through his body, though that was just his way of cultivating. It pained him to leave the Midnight Inn behind, but he had to take the chance. A bunch of oracles were visiting the Midnight Inn, and one of them predicted that his family was still actually alive, and the only way he could get them back was if he gained the attention of some important people in the Champions Tourney. He had no idea what that was, but he couldn't afford getting locked in the inn, so he left. Larry clenched his fists and recalled Jeffrey, the twisted freak who had his family kidnapped for no reason than to see him suffer. He'd spent a long time thinking about revenge. He would get it, one way or another. In an unmapped part of the Origin realm, the being that had taken to calling itself Jeffrey formed a new body that looked a lot like an angel. In his hand was a ticket, covered in blood. At his feet was a shriveled-up body that could no longer be identified. Chapter 1069 All's Fair in Love and War. Typically, Lex had a lot of confidence in himself. He had proven his competence at every turn, and achieved much in his short life. But he knew when to admit that he'd met someone better than him, and that is exactly what happened. Lilith had melted like butter in his hands, and she was practically inseparable from him. He didn't want to pry into their private matters, so he didn't check her age, but he was certain she wasn't exactly a teenager, so it was quite admirable how easily she had swooned. Of course, Lex also used his own sixth sense to judge if she was doing this just to get close to him. The Devils did not have a stellar reputation to begin with, and it wouldn't even be the first time they targeted the inn. But whether they were his instincts, which he could guide to target something much more easily now, his sixth sense, or his general ability to read his target, they all agreed that Lilith was being quite genuine in her appreciation of Gerard. Though, his instincts did give him a soft warning that she came with her own baggage. A devil with a past hiding out at the inn wasn't exactly news of the century, so he moved on. Fortunately, Cindy had completely lost interest in Lex after getting the pint of ice cream as her welcoming gift, though she did share the ice cream with him, so that was nice. But the lack of concern over the date put Lex in the unique opportunity to gather information about Lilith, if he so wished. After all, even if she didn't have ulterior motives didn't mean she wouldn't be trouble. But after thinking about it for a while, Lex ultimately decided not to pry. If Gerard asked for his help, he'd look into her. But since he only asked for help in ensuring the date went well, that is what he focused on. The four of them squeezed into the tuk-tuk while Lilith followed Gerard's instructions and led them to Cirque, who was waiting with the silent wanderer to take them to their next spot. Lex had to admit, without the fear of imminent death, it was quite an enjoyable ride. Cirque then flew them to the site for the next segment of their date, which was a hilly region occupied by a race of evolved worms called Warpal. They were not sentient, but they were incredibly strong as well as dangerous. They had to be, considering that the mountains and hills in the Midnight Realm were made mostly of giant spirit stones. Any worm that could bore through that was far from simple. What made this site perfect for the continuation of their date was that they terraformed the spirit stone, turning it first into fine grains, which eventually clumped together to form some kind of soil. But the region was still being formed, and the soil made of spirit stone dust still contained a tremendous amount of energy, which meant that the slightest touch might actually cause the ground beneath you to explode. Of course, that was not an issue for Lex or any of the others, but for ordinary people this was quite a dangerous location. For them though, it was just an interesting racecourse with unpredictable traps. That just added to the excitement of the racing. Like the mountain milk, there were countless other resources born here that could directly benefit cultivators even at the immortal levels. Even though he had not spied on them, Lex had spent enough time around other cultivators to be able to judge their levels. Cindy and Lilith both were immortals. Since when were immortals so common? There was no point pondering over such a question, because it was in Lex's fate to continuously run into cultivators stronger than him. About 500 miles from here there is a valley where a piece of a rainbow broke off and solidified, turning into small gems. The winner can take one of those gems for free. I believe you might have heard of them. Their official name is Skittles. Both Lilith and Cindy froze. Skittles were legendary natural treasures that had no fixed price in the outside world, because they were never for sale. Not only did they taste amazing, but they also strengthened one's skin, improving the defensive capabilities of any who eats them by many-fold. As a result of skin being refined in such a way, it also naturally enhanced beauty and charm of whoever ate them. They also tasted great. Gerard, who had the Regalia Bloom bloodline, which had undergone multiple evolutions, was the personification of walking, talking charm. The bloodline made everything about him extremely appealing, which had been a source of great pain for him as he gained too many admirers as a result, which impeded him from doing his job. So it was suffice to say, he did not really care about that part of the gem's capability. But even he was tempted by that increase in defense, especially since it could even work on immortals. Lilith and Cindy, too, did not care about the beauty at all. Their eyes were completely not gleaming at the thought of getting their hands on Skittles, and a baleful aura did not immediately surround them. That was all in Lex's mind. None of it was real. I think they like the prize, he said to Gerard, who only smiled. There was a competitiveness in his eyes that said he was not about to just let them win. Without any more banter, everyone quickly got in their respective carts. Lex tossed a rock in the air, and as soon as it touched the ground everyone slammed their foot on the accelerator. The game was on, and it was no longer a playful experience. "Are there any rules?" Lilith yelled over from her cart. "Yeah, just don't kill anyone," Lex responded jokingly, but the very serious nod she gave made him think that she might not have gotten his joke. The next moment, a massive meteor suddenly just appeared in the sky, and it was aiming for all of them. Chapter 1070. Welcome to the family. "Alright, which one of you did that?" Lex screamed as he conjured a dozen arrays around his cart to boost the speed. He looked suspiciously towards Lilith, who had to be instructed not to kill someone, but discovered that she too was taken aback by the meteor hurling down towards them. That's when he recalled Luther wanting to set up a surprise. He looked up, and sure enough, the flames on that meteor seemed all too familiar. Luther had completely mastered the flames, making them even more powerful than the ones he encountered back in his test in the temple. He shook his head, hoping that meteors were the only surprise, when his cart suddenly jerked. A lasso made entirely of energy appeared around his cart without warning, and pulled him backwards. The next second, Cindy zoomed past him. "Thanks for the boost," she said, dissipating the lasso. Lex chuckled. They were going to play games with him? Domination, glyphs, sword intent and countless arrays all appeared around him at once as he tried to regain his spot in the lead. But his opponents were not pushovers either. Gerard had unleashed the power of his bloodline that had undergone 2 evolutions. Regalia Bloom allowed him to channel energy through other objects. In his case, he was treating his entire golf cart as the object, and everything around him as the source of energy. He did not even dodge the flaming meteor, and instead directly crashed into it. But instead of resulting in a devastating explosion, it only provided him with an enormous amount of energy which he used to boost his cart ahead of the others. Lilith summoned black vapors that surrounded her, and painted everything they touched black, suddenly empowering them. The aura she started to exude was deep and powerful, and reminded Lex of a devil he met long ago. On instinct, he could not help but recall the information he read about Lilith. It was something he did. A small, subconscious part of him was constantly monitoring and recording information about his guests, or at least it did that when he still had the host attire. He recalled her full name, which nearly caused him to slam the brakes on his cart. Damn it, was he about to witness a live recreation of the light novels where a rich dad's daughter falls in love with a broke man? Gerard was not exactly without a background, and he was not broke either. But could he compare to Lilith Val Kilger? The last name sounded familiar because it was exactly the same as Loretta Pendal Val Kilger, the daughter of a Dow Lord. Was Lilith her sister? No wonder the aura she exuded felt so similar. This brought a whole new meaning to when Cindy told him that Lilith had never dated anyone. Who would have the guts to date the daughter of a Dow Lord? Probably, only the child of another Dow Lord. Lex felt like he was about to get a headache. As if he didn't have enough problems to deal with. But it should be fine, right? The Midnight Inn also supposedly had a Dow Lord, so they should be equal, right? I'm a little late in saying this, but congratulations on coming second. It's not so simple to beat me in a race, Lex said, forgetting that he was supposed to be humble. Thank you. You put up quite a fight, though Gerard has mentioned you're quite adept at teleportation. Had you used that, the race would have been over from the start. Where's the fun in that? You have to earn your win. Just like you. The aura on your black vapors reminded me of the time I met Loretta. If your powers are anything like hers, then I imagine you could have skipped right to the front as well. Technically, Lex had no idea what Loretta's powers were. But that wasn't the point. The point was to mention that Lex was aware of her background. He looked at her, and saw a frozen expression. Lilith clearly hadn't expected anyone to realize her background so easily. After all, she had not mentioned it to anyone, and Cindy wouldn't either. You've met Loretta? It was pure happenstance. Her father was meeting with the innkeeper, and she was at the inn, so I had the chance. Unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to get to know her properly. Lex said nothing, and he was even smiling as he spoke, but the seriousness in his eyes was not easy to overlook. He was telling her clearly that he knew her background thoroughly. For a moment, she did not speak, as if gathering her thoughts. I have a big family. Even I've never had the chance to meet Loretta. As for my father, I've never even spoken to him, let alone had the opportunity to meet with him. These kinds of things are common in cultivator families. I'm not really qualified to comment on anyone else's family. Mine is pretty strange as well. But the Midnight Inn is my family now. The last time a devil messed with Gerard and the rest, I tossed them into the void. I imagine anyone else in the Midnight Inn would do the same. Lilith turned her head sideways and looked at Lex with a smile. After a moment, she said, "Did you know that among some older devil families, it is customary for a guardian to threaten a new member of the family, especially if they're joining as a spouse? If a threat is not given, it's as if the new member is too weak or incompetent to make a difference." Lex's fake smile froze. Did he just give her his blessing to marry Gerard?